I give a fuck? Why do I give a fuck? Why do I try so hard? Why do I care so much?
Welcome to Why Do I Give a Fuck? A cross-cultural conversation between myself, Deanne Tate,
and Johanna Thompson. In these times of great struggle and possible shift, we ask ourselves,
why do we give a fuck about any of it? How does the lens we see the world through impact what we see?
And what do we do about it?
Hello.
Hello. Good to see you.
How are you?
Well, I am well. It's holiday time in the U.S.
It is. We gonna talk about it.
Holiday time in the U.S.
Yeah. Can we just skip over all of the holidays? Can we just
No, we love the holidays. You know, I love the holidays.
It's not that I love them or hate them. I guess I just don't feel like I've found a good vibe and a good flow for the holidays for me at this point in my life. Like, you know, I would be very happy not to celebrate Thanksgiving. I call it Takesgiving. And I've even gone through different iterations of that over the course of the past few years. I was calling it Gratitude Day in the beginning when I didn't want to call it Thanksgiving. And then, you know, it's gone through different iterations. And now it's Takesgiving for me. You know, I just...
Well, explain what you mean by Takesgiving.
Well, I guess for me, it's reflecting the actual story of what happened around Thanksgiving and kind of highlighting the change in the narrative around what Thanksgiving is. In the U.S., we're taught that Thanksgiving was the celebration between the settlers and the indigenous people, that they came together and they shared a meal, and it was turkey and it was all the things, and they were grateful for each other and for their friendship, and nothing could be further than the truth or from the truth. So yeah, I have bristled at this for probably the past at least 8 years of my life. You know, I've been 10 years in this active state of awakening to the real state of affairs of things. And so that's how it feels for me. I mean, I'm very excited I'm getting married on New Year's Eve. And so I'm very excited about that part. My daughter's coming up for the Christmas holiday, even though myself and my fiance do not identify as Christian. I am going to put a tree up this year because my daughter requested it. And then we'll be rolling into the wedding. So that I have to look forward to and to be excited about. But the holiday thing is just not so much for me. How about you?
Yes, so I love holiday time. It's really interesting to hear thoughts about the holiday, and particularly the first holiday that comes up that like signifies that the US is going into holiday season. And I'm making that distinction because, you know, Thanksgiving is not something that is celebrated on the island of Jamaica, because Thanksgiving is a story being told about...
It is a story,
the creation of the United States and how manifest destiny from these really welcoming indigenous people allowed them to come and massacre all of the folks and take the land and celebrate that every year. So to think about it just as like as a US territory type of celebration that goes on to fit the narrative of what it was to build the US back in the day. What I appreciate about that particular day, which happens on the third Thursday of November, right? Is it the third or the fourth Thursday?
It's the third usually, yeah. It floats a little bit, but it's typically the third.
About the third Thursday of November every year, we have this celebration called Thanksgiving. Young people in schools do whole entire projects. They make turkeys out of little papers. They run around replaying the story of, to Deanne's point, of
the pilgrims, they called themselves supposedly, but they were settlers.
Settlers that were coming in. I'm trying to think of the language, and the indigenous people, and how the indigenous people did help the settlers to figure out how to exist on this land. And so it's the celebration and the story of that, and the truth of the reality of what happened actually on Thanksgiving is that there was a major massacre of the settlers of an entire indigenous population.
Yeah.
But in the US, we don't ever tell the ugliness of our stories, the truth of our stories. We fantasize in our stories. And so that is what is happening when people are not supporting that part of the narrative storytelling of Thanksgiving. And then there's an entire group of folks that are faith-based people or community-oriented people. And during this time, because you do get off from work and everything like that, so you get off from school, it's a time when people come together in celebration. And most of the time it's family, either being family of blood or family that you've created,
right.
Friendsgiving or whatever, and people come together and make this big old feast. The feast includes most of the time a turkey, so tons of turkey is sold throughout the United States. Turkeys are given away. Different families have different type of meals, so I would love to talk about that. So coming from a Caribbean African American family tradition, we have the turkey, we have the macaroni and cheese, we have the sweet potato pies, we have collard greens. We'll also have like some other type of meat or fish, like a salmon. We'll have rice and peas, but the Caribbean part of it. Plantains, you know what I mean? Like, we always make a lasagna because folks want to have a lasagna. So it's a time where you make some of your most comfort foods, like the foods that in your culture and your community, and who makes the best. The best plate is the one who is designated to make that thing. And then it's the joy of breaking bread together. So the sentiment of the holiday that has the harm component of it. But if we're thinking of in a restorative process about it, then it's the making of the food and the breaking the bread and coming together as an opportunity for family to do that, and however you construct your family. And so for that richness of that holiday, I do appreciate that. And the way that we do it is we do make all of the favorite things that we love to eat. We sit around together, we eat it, and then we watch TV. We watch a show together, like something like either a new movie that comes out or anything. And when I'm talking about I'm talking mostly about my my immediate nuclear family. That means my daughters and some of the young people that I've raised up. But that's a wonderful opportunity for people to get together. And that's the designated time, because as the Christmas and those and the New Year celebrations come on, people like kind of orient to that in a little bit.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like a lovely time. Can I come?
Yeah, it's a cookout.
I mean, and I think a lot of it has to do with maybe some childhood trauma around holidays for me. Holidays were always very stressful in my household for my mom, especially if she had to cook the meal. God rest her soul, but she was not a cook and did not like to cook. And so anytime she had to create a meal just for us, I'm the middle of three sisters, so there were 5 of us in the family, just cooking for us was very stressful for her. But when she had to do it for, extended family, my grandmother lived in the same town. My aunt and uncle also lived there. So we always had at least, the 5 of us plus 7, 8. So we had at least 8 people, if not more, if people came from out of town. And that was always super stressful for her. So I don't have a lot of really good memories of the holidays when it comes to that. And then I think, in the past, maybe 8 to 10 years of my awakening, I've been much more aware of how's this come? How do I want to say this? I feel like I want to say like my obligation as a white human to be sitting around the table of other white humans, and to wait for the foolishness to show up, and then to counter it, to call it out, call it in, to have that moment. And sometimes in my early days of the awakening, I wasn't as good at that. And I feel like I'm a little better at it now. But I also have a fiance who does not identify as white. And so he comes to the table and and I have a bonus brother who does not identify as white. They're both Black men. So they come into this, and it changes the dynamic. So the foolishness doesn't show up as much, or it's super subtle, super subtle. And then I have to think about, am I going to address it, say something that then causes further discomfort for my bonus brother Jaman and my fiance Brian, or do I, talk about it later? And then if it's talk about it later, do I have the courage to bring it up later when it's not fresh, And so, yeah, there's lots of that swirling around.
So I am definitely hearing all the stress of the holidays.
Yeah, can we just skip it? Can we just skip it?
So it's very interesting to culturally think about like what the differences of that can be, right? And like depending on, and especially if you have like a mixed community of people that come together during this time. When I was with most of my family during the holiday period of time in Northern California, it's a very diverse group of people that we have holiday with. So, yes, in the same way that you have blended family, non-white and other kinds of folks around. So we have people from everywhere in our family.
Yeah.
When we say that, that's always like family, however you construct it, both blood and marriage and all that kind of stuff. I'm curious as to when the foolishness shows up, what does it look like to address it for you in the times when you've made a decision to address it? How do you address it? How do you approach the address?
That has definitely evolved for me over time, because in the process of my 10 years, this past 10 years of awakening, in the earlier days, I was very much, and I think I've mentioned this before, I was very much like, how a little girl with a little pretty dress on, she's got big girl panties on, she'll keep lifting her skirt up and going, look at my big girl panties, look at my big. That's kind of the energy that I had in the early days. And so if foolishness came up and I actually heard it, because I didn't always hear it as I was working on opening those ears and doing better about that. But when it would show up and I heard it, I tended to come in hot, which wasn't always the best way to handle it. So I've tried to learn how to be a little more discerning about it. Not to say that I am worried about protecting the other person's feelings, but I'm just more aware of the ability that I have to blow up the entire situation and make it, especially if I've got non-white folks if I'm in mixed company, then I feel like I have more of an obligation to be better about not coming in with a bludgeon for the person that raised the foolishness. It's a learning opportunity. And if I come in too hot, that learning doesn't always happen, because then it just becomes about me being hot. So I said all that to say that it looks different depending on what the circumstances are. It depends on who it is, depends on when it happens, depends on, a lot of different factors. But what I want to challenge myself to be better about is, if it doesn't feel like the right timing to call it in the moment for whatever reason, remembering and pulling up that courage. It's the hotness that gives me often the courage to like speak into it. It's that surge of adrenaline, I guess it is, that usually causes me to be good about diving into that. If I assess the situation and decide that I want to deal with it later, I run the risk of not having that adrenaline and then losing the courage to say, hey, can I talk to you about this? I just want to bring this in. So just being full transparency. I'm not super good at it. So working on all of that.
All right. So I'm going to call in your vulnerability, if I may.
Okay.
Saying that you're not so good at it, what are the things that you are qualifying as not so good? Besides I heard you say that coming in hot, that you used to be able to come in hot and have less discerning. Now you have more discerning on like, when is the appropriate time to address something that might be harmful to somebody who's there, or just harmful as an ideology to hold in your space. I'm curious, like, do you have an example like, do you have one example to work off of? And the reason why I'm asking, because I think that this would be helpful for the stress of the holidays and people going into these situations, and also wanting to be like, I don't want to come and bring any of my political positions or my socio ideologies about how people, you know, should be relating to each other. And a lot of families do have these type of clashes that can come up around breaking bread at this dinner table that we're forced ourselves into because of this narrative that we built up back in the day, that was built on false premises, as it was anyway.
An example. The example that comes to mind is not necessarily racially foolishness, but my a family member made a. I'm going to be discerning so that I'm not pointing fingers, but a family member used the term, and I don't remember exactly the phrase that she said, so I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but she said something to the effect of, he looked like he belonged on the short bus. And people laughed, and I went, you know, and at the time, because it wasn't a racially based statement, I chose, I didn't have that adrenaline. It took I heard it, but for some reason it took a minute to click in my head that was that.
Thank you for saying that.
Should be corrected. And, or was ableist, not necessarily should be corrected, because I'm trying not to do the should thing, but that it was an ableist statement and was an opportunity to be corrected. And I didn't do it in the moment. And I convinced myself that I was going to do it later. And then I never found the right, I got stuck in how to do it, how to call that person in, how to say, hey, this really bothered me, and I wanted to bring it to your attention, or I wanted to have a conversation about it. As I'm saying that right now, I'm like, why didn't I think to say that? Because that's the way to do it, right? But I convinced myself that I didn't know how to broach the subject. And I'm often that person that most people are just waiting for me to take offense at something and bring it up. So I struggle with always being that person and letting that be the excuse that I give myself to not bring it up yet a fucking again. And so yeah, that's my example.
Okay, I appreciate that example. If there was a moment to address it again, like, can we model like what that could look like?
Sure.
All right.
How do you want to do that?
Yeah, that person came out here and they was looking like they should be on the short bus.
Can I just say that I've been learning that using the term the short bus to refer to somebody maybe not having certain skill sets or certain abilities or certain is really very ableist language and can be very offensive to people. And I wonder if maybe there's a different way that you could say it as my earbud falls out of my ear.
Does that feel comfortable to you? That felt comfortable.
It felt really clumsy, but
well, because I know you, right? We've been having conversations. So as you're saying it, you're like, and eyes is rolling all around.
All my tells.
Here's the truth about the reality of those type of things. And you brought up a point where in any group of people, there's going to be something that somebody says that could be harmful to somebody.
Yeah.
The way that I like to, and I think that it makes me the most comfortable in addressing it, and I think it makes people in the room addressing it, and it also calls in accountability, is to ask someone what they mean by that, because you can also not fully understand how they're using the reference. I've come to that clarity living on an island where people say things like, they'll say, I just told you that a little while ago. And when you tell me a little while ago, I'm thinking a week ago, a month ago. When they say a little while ago in Jamaica, they mean just a second ago.
Oh, like, okay.
Just a second ago. Okay. So like I had to you didn't tell me that a little while ago. And that my responsiveness to that is inappropriate to actually what the person is saying. I'm not saying that. Like, we know our cultural context and our cultural clues with the racist, ableist community that United States always uplifts.
Right.
The opportunity then makes the person have to reflect on what it is that they've said this thing. When you say, what do you mean by that? I don't, just the short bus. And then if they say, oh, you know what I mean by that. No, let's talk about it. Let's call it out. Let's make sure that everybody in the room hears,
understands
you're defining what it is that you're saying. And it's not so harmful, because it does then give people love to have the spotlight. They love to like have this, the mic. Okay, let me explain. The short bus is, and if you are in your explanation, start feeling uncomfortable about how you talking about the short bus, that is the moment that you say, ooh, maybe I shouldn't use that. And it's an opportunity to keep laughing about it. Ha ha ha. But maybe we shouldn't do that, because now we acknowledge the accountability to what the harm looks like. I always thought, where you come up with that? How did you hear that? Because I'm just, half the time I'm really curious, because people will say things just in the normalcy of their culture. They're just saying it in the normalcy of like, this is how we talk. I love being on the island of Jamaica, because it's a very, I said what I said culture. I don't care if it's hurting somebody else's feelings. I don't. And I don't have to be I don't have to be accountable to somebody else's culture. I mean, to somebody else's feelings.
That's interesting.
Because I am in the autonomy of my values, and I'm speaking the truth to you about how I feel and think. Now, is there an opportunity to have a discussion about that afterwards? Yes. But people stand real strong. They're not in USian politeness just to be polite.
Yeah. Because is that hard? Is that hard? Was that an adjustment for you as a USian, where we're constantly talking about doing things differently and not causing harm?
It is. Yes, it's an adjustment, because new things are an adjustment. So I'm just going to be real about that.
Yeah.
Was it harmful to me? No, I appreciate truth. I would rather sit in someone's face who's going to be real about, you're a woman, I'm not letting you do that. Okay, good. So now I have an understanding that you are saying to me, I can't do something because of how you see me gendered or what my physicality is. And then my thing is why do you think I can't do that? Most of the time it is, and it's, I'll give you a perfect example. I just stopped myself, but I was just like, oh yeah, I want to build like a little pool situation, blah, 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 in the back. So, because I'm trying to do a guest house in Jamaica, or I was trying to do a guest house situation.
You will again. You will again. It will rise again. I promise.
We'll do a little pool. And so I was talking to construction people. They started laughing at first. You're a woman, you can't do that. So like, that's the first thing. And I'm like,
I would really struggle with that.
My whole body responds and everything.
Yeah.
Like, and then they start going, okay, have you ever lifted up and they started talking about the components of the pieces of the things that I needed to build the pool. Gotcha. And they're like, have you ever lifted up do you know how many pounds it is? You just can't do it. Like you can't do what your brain has told you that you can do, because there's actual you're going to need this type of help. You're going to need this type of machine. You're going to need this type of tool. And okay, hearing that, I had the understanding of what they actually meant by you just can't do it. So then we could work through what was possible. What are the resources that I needed? But the reality of the situation is what I thought that I actually could do. I needed to be open to understanding I actually can't do that. I had to have a different orientation to my understanding of what my capacity was within what my desires are. Not that you can't work it out, but the reality was I had to be clear. You're thinking that you're going to do one thing, and then you're going to start the process and you're going to come up with a whole bunch of barriers. They weren't trying to harm me in what they were saying. They were trying to help me to be more realistic about
that does cause trigger in me, though. I'm like, do you think they would say the same thing to a man? And I know that's hard. You're speaking for what somebody would do, but culturally, do you think? Have you ever heard anybody tell a man he can't do something?
Culturally, there's clear general. Yes, if there was like, they don't believe that there's certain role. What I've experienced, not everybody, so let me not generalize on the whole culture of people. But a majority of the understanding is that the gender roles are clear, and they're clear for a reason, because they believe that the skill sets fall where they fall.
Okay.
And so
As an
I don't,
independent woman, I would imagine that would be
I don't,
an
and
adjustment.
it's an adjustment, but it doesn't take away from being an independent woman. It actually
Right.
offers more capacity as to how you can be independent because you're not putting yourself in a place where you can't be successful.
Gotcha.
You see,
Gotcha.
it's like where you're struggling more, where you're like,
Yeah.
why do that to yourself when this is, you can be an independent woman, but you need to construct your independent womanness in something that you actually can achieve rather than
right.
you can't
Yeah.
achieve it. You just have to be realistic about that. And that is one of the things that is culturally different, I think, in the US, is that it's just like we have created this narrative of everybody can
Do anything.
and that's just not the truth. That's not real. Not
Yeah.
everybody can do everything because the systems exist, because of physicalities exist, because of our
Right.
neurological processing. We just
Right.
not everybody can get everything, but it is making sure that we are being conscious of that fact. And when we talk about equity, how are we creating spaces where people have the resources and the chance to get to the things that it is that they need? And I think
Yeah.
that is the difference, not equality, but equity, and recognizing where our differences are and where our supports, where our strengths are, and where our supports for the things that we lack, or have limiteds of, and how do we get us to a place where we can shift those resources to help people achieve what kind of their goals.
Yeah.
And I think that that's important to be thinking about as we come into the holidays and we come into these conversations and we come into these communities where we do more socialization, if we choose to do that outside of what our nuclear are, because we're, going to parties, going to the office parties, participating in these celebrations that might be placed in one faith base, but remembering that there's a whole bunch of other faith bases that do exist, and how do we pull that
Don't
into
forget the alcohol that's going to be present.
the alcohol? And so a lot of truth telling can happen when people are in
the alcohol
type of
and the
spirit.
social batteries running down because of all the people are going to be doing, and
all the time. So
it's
all
a
of these things
real
come
thing.
around holiday in the US, and people go through a ton of emotion around that, a ton of recognizing that they might not have the support systems that they were hoping, a lot of narrative storytelling about what a holiday should look like.
Should
And
be
so
right.
if you're not meeting that expectation of what a holiday should look like, people start feeling very sad. And I'm inviting people in this time of holiday to be thinking about what it is that allows you to feel your most complete. That's the celebration.
That's a
What does that
beautiful
love look
thing.
like? You know what I mean? Make you feel the most complete, and to share that with the folks that you want to be in community with. That's the celebration.
Yeah, I've always wanted to go and volunteer and serve others on Takesgiving. I call it Takesgiving. That's what I've landed now. That's the moniker that I use now. And my fiance and I are talking about how to make that happen this year. It's the first year that I really feel like I've ever, because I'm usually in North Carolina with my mom. I mean, that's the other thing that just occurred to me. First holiday season without her, because my mom passed away last December, and I keep thinking towards the wedding, because the wedding is going to be on New Year's Eve, and the first anniversary of her passing is the day before. So we're doing a dinner the night before with all of the people that are going to be traveling in, and the family, because a lot of them haven't met each other, and we know that weddings it's hard to talk to people and get to know them. Music's blaring and you're out of your element and all of that. So we've created this dinner the night before. Hope you're going to be able to join us.
Yes.
And full disclosure, Jay better be coming. And so, but that's the anniversary. That's the actual anniversary of her death. So we'll all be together. And so, it just occurred to me. I guess I've been thinking so much towards the wedding that it hadn't occurred to me yet that this was the first year without her. And so we've usually been down in North Carolina. It's a really, really small town. They don't do as much mutual aid in that town as I would like. And this year we're going to be up here for Thanksgiving. So up in Bridgeport, and there's lots of opportunities for mutual aid. So that is definitely, I love that suggestion, that don't get caught up in what you think it should be. Do what makes you feel the most complete. whatever that looks like. I love that. Thank you for that offering. That's a good framework. And I also took my other takeaway this episode was, tell me more about what you mean, or can you explain more about that?
Checking with people, like, where it come from.
Because you're right. When people start to talk about when they've said something that's not, and you're wanting to hear their own correction.
Yeah.
If they get the opportunity to talk more about what it is, they will, some will call it digging their own grave, but it is an opportunity for them to hear out loud. When I was working the hotline, the 211 hotline, that was one of the things that we would do, is encourage people to they would express what was going on for them. We would reflect back to them what feelings we were hearing, not details about the story, but the feelings that we were hearing. And then if we didn't get it right, or, then they would be like, no, that's not what I'm feeling this. But as they were hearing us reflecting it back to them, it gave them an opportunity to internalize and hear, right, and reflect what they're going through. And they often, all the time, found their own answers, usually, to what it is that they were going through, because we provided them an opportunity to reflect. So thank you for providing me the opportunity to reflect.
I like walking us through these things, and helping people take care of themselves and each other in a way that's just more connected and human, especially during the holidays, when there could be an opportunity for people to feel really lonely and isolated from themselves and from their communities. And so there's an opportunity to figure out ways to make those communications and that dignity, bringing it back into what the holiday spirit should be about.
Yeah, I appreciate that focus and that framing. And so for those of you, this episode will be dropping the week of Thanksgiving. So hopefully there were some little tidbits that you can take away as you're going into this season, if you live in the US. And Canada has Thanksgiving too, but they do it in October. So they've already had their Thanksgiving.
It makes sense, because that in population of indigenous people were treated the same way.
Yeah, they were. Yeah, they were. So, yeah. And so for anybody that's listening from other countries, this just occurs to me, drop in the comments, send us an email, whatever you want to do to let us know, what are your holiday, what is the word? Traditions that you celebrate, that you love, and maybe one or two that you want to do differently or find a new way to handle. We would love to hear about that. I would love to. Hey, we had a listener from Uzbekistan. So if you are listening again, that person from Uzbekistan, please comment or email and let us know how you celebrate any holidays and what is special to you, because I want to learn. I want to learn more about that. So.
And there's so many variations. I smile so much because one of the traditions that we had as my young people were growing up is going to Disney during the holidays. That was the celebration. We didn't do trees and all that here. I was just we're gonna
let them do the decorating. That's smart.
And
that is smart. And you live in Florida, so it's easy access. Yeah.
At Epcot Center, they had holidays around the world, but that was really predominantly Christian faith-based.
Right,
so you would hear how they celebrated Christianity, Christmas, at all the different places in the world. And even there were variations of that were really exciting and lovely. But I just want to kind of name some of the things that we have. Kwanzaa, which is a celebration that was created in the United States. African Americans, the day after Christmas through the first day of the new year is their celebration. We have the the Judaism.
Hanukkah.
Is to celebrate Hanukkah during this time of the year. Then we have the Christian Christmas during this time of the year. Ramadan and all of that is a little bit later. I think that's going into.
I believe so. Some of the holidays kind of float in how they land. Yeah.
And then anything else, I know that Chinese New Year, we have New Year the way that we celebrate New Year on the calendar that we utilize. But I know that the Chinese traditions, that they have their various New Year celebrations that are coming out of there. So welcoming and inviting anyone to share on one of our social media platforms what the celebrations are towards the end of the year, going into a new year on our calendar. We'd love to hear it and love to be able to be in celebration with you, feeling whatever completion you need to feel as you celebrate with people.
And I just want to say that a tradition in the U.S. territories is the day after Christmas. The day after Thanksgiving is typically what's called Boxing Day. Well, no, Boxing Day is the day after Christmas. Black Friday, unfortunately, is the day after Thanksgiving. I know.
That's a celebration of capitalism.
Yes, it's a celebration of capitalism. And I want to encourage everybody, boycott. We are not shopping on Friday. I don't even like calling it Black Friday. But we're not. So
and watch your dollars,
no Cyber Monday. No, try to avoid. If you can do one thing differently this year, how can you celebrate this block of holidays that we do in the U.S. without giving in to the capitalist drive that we get fed? That's another form of propaganda. So stay your course, stand your ground. Don't give in to the capitalism. That's
send it to some people in need. Send it to Jamaica.
Yes.
Send it to Palestine.
Don't put
need. Let's really
go to our link tree. Go to our link tree and our links and all of our different socials and on our website. Go to our link tree and you'll see all kinds of different ways that you can give to people that are in need. So take all the money that you normally buy, those mounds of presents underneath your tree, if you celebrate with the Christian trappings, and give it to somebody who needs it. Good, dear God, I mean, and teach your kids that too. Teach your kids that too, to help them look at the list together and say, where do we want to help, and get them involved. It'll be hard if they're used to just this, vomiting of gifts on Christmas Day, but they'll figure it out. You're teaching them to be a human and to think globally. That's the greatest present you can ever give.
And it's nothing to convince. Once you take a young person out and you give them the experience of gifting, like even one of the things that I did with my young person when she was little, she had tons and tons and tons of stuffed animals. She couldn't do nothing with them. We made sure all the stuffed animals were clean, and then we went. We found the people who were giving out the food trays, and we went with them on their delivery, and she just was handing out these stuffed animals to the kids in the houses or to the elderly people who wanted a stuffed animal. And I mean, I wish I could call her in true, but to see like the experience of her doing that, I think was a lifetime experience of like joy. And it was just as exciting as getting a gift as to be able to see what gift giving and the responsiveness and the gifts that she got from the people being in so much gratitude for her care and consideration. So
that's beautiful. I've got lots of takeaways from this episode. So thank you, my friend.
It's a holiday.
All right, everybody, you'll make it through however it manifests, but just do at least one thing differently. That's our challenge.
And we'll see you on the other side.
We'll see you on the other side.
All right, bless.
Thanks for joining us. Until next time, as you move throughout your day, continue to ask yourself,
Why Do I Give a Fuck is produced in collaboration with Johanna and Diane. Music by Norwegian musician Water. See you next time.